Spider-Man, an icon since 1962. He's had multiple movies, video games, TV shows, and, of course, comic books. And he also happens to be my favorite superhero. Spidey is one of those characters that transcends decades and generations because when he was written to appeal to any kid or really anyone who struggles. He's a hero that everyone can cheer for, and even recently has had identities lying outside of Peter Parker. And most recently, he received a sequel to the acclaimed 2018 award-winning video game from Insomniac. And that particular version of the character has become many fans' definitive version. Oh, and if you're new to the channel, I'm John and this is Sydney Park Rangers, and here we talk all things movies and theme park related. Which begs the question, well, why am I talking about Spider-Man today? To please the YouTube algorithm? I actually really want to discuss something that I think is an issue for Spidey right now. And Spidey doesn't really have many issues at the moment. Movies? Great. TV shows? Well, we have a freaking Spider-Man noir show coming from Lord & Miller, so that should be pretty sick. And in case you aren't familiar with who those guys are, they made Across the Spider-Verse. And I mean, come on, who doesn't want a live-action Spider-Man noir show? That would be insanely cool. His comics? I'm gonna be honest, lately I haven't read any of them. I don't read Marvel very much anymore. If I'm reading anything these days, I'm mostly reading manga. I'm sure they're at least halfway decent though, but I digress. Today, I want to talk about Spider-Man's rides, and there are 3 of them, just in case you didn't know. There's one in Islands of Adventure and Universal Orlando, there's one at Universal Studios Japan, and there's one in Disneyland California. The one in Islands of Adventure and the one in Universal Studios Japan are actually identical. And unfortunately for the Japanese park on January 22nd, 2024, that ride is no longer going to be in service. And as to why Universal Hollywood never got a version of this ride, who's to say? Some people speculate that the parks were just severely underfunded in those early years, therefore Universal Hollywood never got a version of that ride. And that might be true, but I'd also like to just point out that there are some very strange rights issues when it comes to the use of Marvel characters in theme parks. And if you don't know about this, buckle up, I'm going to give you some very brief flyover history of what this is. So in the 90s, Marvel actually almost went bankrupt. Marvel actually sold the rights to their characters to multiple different studios. Sony got Spider-Man, which they still have to this day. Fox got the X-Men and Fantastic Four, along with any subsequent characters that coincide or go along with those teams. And Universal got Hulk. And also out of that, Marvel Studios was founded in 1993. Disney actually owns the rights to Marvel now and actually has a deal with Sony worked out so that they can feature Spider-Man in their MCU movies. But what does this deal mean for theme parks? Well, in 1994, MCA, which is the parent company of Universal and Warner Brothers, actually signed a deal with Marvel for the use of their characters in theme parks. And when Disney bought Marvel Entertainment in 2009 to the tune of $4 billion, many folks began to wonder if Disney were going to bring Marvel characters to Disney World and Disneyland. And obviously, if you've been to Disney World or Disneyland, you know that they actually do use Marvel characters. But what you may have noticed is that in Disney World, there's no mention of Spider-Man, there's no mention of Hulk, there's no mention of Iron Man or Captain America, or any of the typical MCU characters that we've all come to know over the years. All that we have in Disney World currently are Guardians of the Galaxy. And that's because when Universal bought the rights to use characters in theme parks, they actually set it up so that Disney cannot use Marvel characters east of the Mississippi River, but they can use them west of the Mississippi River. Very strange deal, but that's why you aren't seeing an Avengers campus popping up in Disney World anytime soon. But it is why you see Cosmic Rewind in Epcot, and you may get some other fringe characters that don't necessarily belong to the Avengers showing up in Disney World in years to come. This deal actually exists perpetually until Universal decides that they either want to retheme Marvel Superhero Island at Islands of Adventure, or they just decide that they're done with the characters and want to let the rights revert back to Marvel. At the end of the day, though, none of that really matters. This video is about Spider-Man rides, so let's talk about the Spider-Man rides. And I think since we're already talking about Universal Studios, we might as well just go ahead and start with that ride, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. This ride is everything to a Spider-Man fan, or at least it is to me. Personally, I love this ride, but it definitely is getting a little dated. The ride opened in 1999 with state-of-the-art special effects as one of the flagship rides that pioneered and opened Islands of Adventure in Universal. This is the ride that sort of pioneered much of Universal's screen rides. But if we're being honest, to me, it's still the pinnacle of what those rides can be. Now, why that is, I don't really know. I think there's any number of speculations that you could make as to why that's the case. And some of you may disagree with me. Some of you may like Fast and Furious better than The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. Or heck, some of you might even like the Transformers ride better than The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. None of that's neither here or there. I think that ultimately, though, it is worth mentioning that Spider-Man has held up the best over the years to me. And I think that there are a couple of reasons at play there. I think that perhaps the biggest reason is that there's probably a significant amount of R&D that went into the front end of making this ride what it currently is. And obviously the ride, outside of general maintenance, has received several updates over the years to keep it fresh and try and make it as relevant as possible as a 20 however some odd year old ride can be. And I think that part of the charm of this ride is that it just doesn't take itself too seriously. You start out by walking through the Daily Bugle, and it's definitely a Daily Bugle that's, out of the 90s animated Spider-Man series. You can definitely feel that sense of comic bookiness and animatedness to the overall aesthetic of the queue and even the ride itself. And the setup for the ride is sort of this quest from J. Jonah Jameson himself that enlists you to go and cover this story of a band of Spider-Man rogues trying to steal the Statue of Liberty, and Spider-Man is going to thwart their plan, as he always does. And you're the guy that's got to take the pictures, I guess. As you ride through, it's a lot of fun. There's practical sets, and they're of course mixed in with the screens and the 3D effects that sort of go along with a ride of this style. But I think that some of the effects that they use are very much effective in where they're placed and how they interact with the rider, and also just the way that you're able to kind of get wrapped up in the story a little bit easier and a little bit quicker compared to, say, something like Transformers. Part of that may just be the fact that I'm a Spider-Man fan way more than I am a Transformers fan. But I think that it also just gives credence to the fact that there was a lot of attention that went into Islands of Adventure in the early days. Whereas now Universal seems to just sort of crop up rides like this and kind of check a box for whatever IP is currently hot, or that they think is currently hot. I'm looking at you, minions. So as you're going around on this ride, you're met by Doc Ock, Scream, Hobgoblin, Hydro Man, and Electro. And personally, I would have swapped out Scream with Venom and probably Hobgoblin with Green Goblin, but I guess for the story they're trying to tell, it makes sense to have sort of, the B characters of those villain types instead of, your top tier ones. Whatever, neither here or there. Again, it still makes the ride really fun to be able to interact with those characters, but who doesn't want to see 19 inches of Venom on the Spider-Man ride? All of that to say, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man is always a must-go when I am at Universal Islands of Adventure, and I think it'll probably remain that until they take the ride down or whatever. But there is another Spider-Man ride that we have to talk about. Disney had a chance to do something really, really cool with Spider-Man, given the fact that they had this whole Avengers campus and there was going to be a Spider-Man themed ride, and they were actually able to use the current Spider-Man from the films, Tom Holland, to accomplish this. And I really do need to preface this entire portion just by stating that I've never been to Disneyland, still have not been. I plan on going. I want to go. I want to go to Avengers Campus. I want to go see Disneyland. I always hear from friends that it's the superior park and all of this, so I need to go. But take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I haven't actually been on the Spider-Man ride at Disneyland, and I probably won't at least until sometime in 2024. I have watched ride-throughs, and I do have some opinions on what I know the ride to be. So, the Spider-Man ride in Disney's Avengers Campus is called Web-Slingers, and it basically starts with you entering this room, and in the room, Karen's talking to you. I'm pretty sure it's Karen, not Friday, whatever, one of those, AI things from Tony Stark, whatever it is. They're talking to you, and then in pops Peter Parker, and he's, working on these Spider-Bot things, and then they are able to multiply themselves, and oh no, there's too many of them. They're self-replicating at a pace that we can't keep up with, and they're kind of causing havoc and, mayhem and all this and that. So Spider-Man has to come in and save the day. And who does he think is the best person to help him with this? Not Iron Man. Me and you. Us. I guess. And basically what the ride consists of is you get into a cart. And it's not a cart like the one that you get in at Universal. No. It's kind of like the bus things at Universal that just sort of like switch sides, and there's a giant screen in front of you, of course, and you have to whip your way through the whole thing and web up the spider bots. And at the end, everyone gives you a round of applause, and Spider-Man says thank you, and we don't have to tell Mr. Stark about it, so ace. We did it, guys. I know that I'm saying a lot of this with a lot of sarcasm, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people that actually enjoy this ride. It by no means sounds like it's an awful ride or anything like that. I think my main issue is the fact that we have a character like Spider-Man who crawls on walls, and yes, does shoot webs, but he doesn't just always shoot his web at things like to kill them or to make them malfunction or whatever. Spider-Man swings from things. He swings through cities. He is, hey man, if you've played that new Spider-Man game, you're web winging it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got a whole lot of stuff you can do as Spider-Man. And not to mention, you've got super strength. Oh, and you have spider sense. I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at is there's a whole myriad of things and power abilities that you can play with a character like Spider-Man. And also, this is the biggest thing to me probably. Why on earth are we going to craft a ride about Spider-Man and not use any Spider-Man villains? Dude, what are we doing here? Why aren't we using Green Goblin? Why aren't we using Venom? Why aren't we using Hobgoblin? Why aren't we using Spot? Why aren't we using Rhino, Electro, Doc Ock? The list goes on. We couldn't use one of these characters? Not one? Come on. Now, I have thought about this a little bit, and the only thing that I can come up with in my, pea brain is the fact that maybe, potentially, there's some clause with Marvel and Disney and Sony that prevents them from using Spider-Man villains in a Disney theme park. I have no idea. It seems like one of those things that you wouldn't just want to throw away. Maybe you figure out how to pay for that or work it into the contract so that you can use at least X amount of villains. I don't know. I'm just shooting from the hip here today. But essentially this ride is Toy Story Mania, except there's spider bots. Spider-Man sort of swings around. It's a very low budget CGI looking Spidey. He's got that weird costume that they made him for Avengers Campus that just doesn't make any sense. I don't know. But I think if both of these rides existed in some sort of magical theme park where they are side by side next to each other, I'm gonna go on The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man way more times than I'm gonna go on Web Slingers. And that ride is 24 years old, y'all. 24! How old is Web Slingers? Two. It's 2. Okay, so we've established that we have a ride that's older, and we have a ride that leaves a lot to be desired. So where do you move forward from here? I think to properly examine that question, we should really look at Avatar Flight of Passage. Now, why would we look at Avatar Flight of Passage? Besides the fact that it's one of my all-time favorite rides, I think that Avatar Flight of Passage does a couple of things really, really well. I think the first thing that it does well is it reinvigorated an IP that otherwise felt dead, just because of the sheer amount of time between the first Avatar and the one that came out last December. But the second thing that it did was it pioneered some new ride tech that just elevates what it really means to be immersed in something, I think. And I can speak to this a little more than maybe your average person just because I've been a VR enthusiast for quite some time. And with VR, obviously comes the various levels of immersion depending on what kind of headset you've got, what sort of controllers you've got, what games you're playing, all those sorts of things. Now, yes, VR does grant you a level of submersion that you would not otherwise feel outside of that context, but the closest thing that I've found has been Flight of Passage. And I think for someone who hasn't ever ridden it before, trying to describe it to you isn't going to ever do it justice. You really do need to ride it. But the best way that I can describe it is essentially, you know how in Avatar, the movie, if you've never seen the movie, then this isn't going to make any sense to you, but I digress. When they go to like the mountaintop in the first movie and they've got the banshee things and, you know, they've got their weird, very sus ponytails that they have to match with one of these creatures. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about. And then you get on the back of this thing and you ride it and yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, basically what they've done with this ride is they've cut out the middleman and some very nice Na'vi scientists or human scientists that are just in their avatar bodies. Who cares? They cut out the middleman. They cut out the journey and all of the meaning that goes along with it. And you get up to the top of the mountain or whatever, or you've already got an avatar up there. I can't remember exactly how the ride goes. It's been a little bit. It's been over a year. More or less, you get up there, you go through this Neuralink thing, and it connects you to your avatar, and boom, you're on a banshee. The coolest thing about this ride is the fact that you're like on it kind of like you're riding a bike or a motorcycle. Probably more a motorcycle than a bicycle if I had to compare it to something. But what's really neat is when you're riding it on like the sides of your thighs and your calves, you can feel the ride vehicle moving as if it's breathing, like you're actually on this thing. And the screen, it definitely has its sweet spots, but if you get to ride it in a sweet spot, you legitimately cannot see the edges. And I have ridden it like that several times, and it's a really, really cool way to experience that ride. When you're on it, it takes you through, and the fact that you can't exactly tell where you're at, where your body's at, the ride vehicle sort of hovers a little bit. I'm sure it's on some sort of a hydraulic thing, whatever. I don't know exactly how it works. We can do a deep dive if you guys want to do that. Let me know in the comments. But it's one of those deals where as you're riding, you really feel like you're on the back of this thing and like you're flying. And to the point where like it'll drop and you're not actually dropping, but your stomach is telling you that you're dropping and your brain is telling you that you're dropping. It's just one of those things that are really cool. What does all that have to do with Spider-Man? I think you can sort of see where I'm going with this. To me, when it comes to Spider-Man, you have to establish a good story for him. I think there are so many good Spider-Man stories that have been told and that are continuing to be told, and truthfully that I'm experiencing right now as I'm in the middle of playing Spider-Man 2, that it's anything below those bars that have been set over the years just feels cheap. It just doesn't feel right. And I think that's part of the issue with web-slingers, or part of my issue with it anyway. It just feels cheap. It feels like a cash-in. It feels like one of those things that Disney was like, yeah, Spider-Man ride, kids are gonna love it. That's great. But what about the guy that's, what about the nearly 30-year-old that grew up loving Spider-Man, that has Spider-Man tattooed on his leg? Is there something for more seasoned fans and fans that have, been around for a long time? There should be. And I think that, here's the thing, I think you can really do both. I think you can captivate new fans while still servicing older fans. The biggest thing that you need to do there is create a ride story that is more intriguing than just some robots get loose and Spider-Man has to have your help to web them up. Listen to what I just said. Come on, man. That's like the pitch that gets thrown away in the garbage can on meeting one. That's not the ride you end up making, Disney. The second thing is you also have to have a ride vehicle that makes you feel like you're Spider-Man. So where I'm going with the whole Avatar thing, that ride has you postured such that you're sort of like this. And if you're sort of like this on a motorcycle, then that works for riding on the back of something. But if it's a Spider-Man ride, you could, and I could be totally off base. I'm not an Imagineer. I have no engineering background. I don't know what I'm talking about. It stands to reason in my brain that you could potentially shift that to a degree where you're sort of more upright. And maybe you have a little bit of fluidity and your legs kind of dangle as if you're like on a dangling roller coaster or something like that. What if you have a ride type that's like that? You could still have multiple people in a row as Avatar does. That way you can move more people through the queue quicker. You could even have it so there are varying levels, same show building, so to speak. Or you could do a Forbidden Journey style attraction with it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a ride at Universal Studios called Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, and it's kind of similar to what I'm talking about. You're a little more like, in your seat versus how I think you'd want to feel as Spider-Man, a little more upright and spry, but you're able to move through. And the cool thing about Forbidden Journey, I know that ride gives a lot of people motion sickness, but it's one of those things where if you're going on a Spider-Man ride and you're going to be assisting Spider-Man, you probably should be up for being able to web-slinger or whatever. I don't know. And in terms of narrative and how, all of us writers become also a Spider-Man, if it's Avengers Campus, if that's where we're doing this ride, maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. is field testing some temporary superhero serum, and they use Spider-Man's blood to be the first one that they're trying. And guess what? You're the recruits that get to try it out and help him stop villains, some of his rogues, in a very similar style chase sequence to maybe how the Adventures of Spider-Man does it at Universal, but, make it a different narrative, make it a different story, and you could use, the likeness of Spider-Man's villains from the films, not, comic booky 3D rendering versions. The cool thing about the Web Slingers attraction is the fact that you're able to actually, shoot webs at things, and the ride sort of recognizes where your hand's at and what you're aiming at and whatever. That's cool. Combine that, use that in an attraction that actually makes you feel like you're Spider-Man, like you're actually flipping around and stuff. I think that's the thing that's lacking. I think that would be sort of the S-tier Spider-Man ride that we've yet to really get, and that frankly they haven't even attempted to make. Now, again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an Imagineer. I'm not anything but a guy on YouTube telling you what I would like to see in a Spider-Man ride. And, also the fact that I'm just a big Spider-Man nerd. But I think that there's a case to be made for a much better Spider-Man ride than what we've had that I love over the past 24 years, or whatever I said, I can't remember. And, the one that's like a couple years old that I will eventually ride, I'm sure, and I'm sure that I'll have, a general amount of fun with it. But nothing that's making me feel like Spider-Man. You know what I'm saying? I want something that makes me feel like I'm the boy right now. I am, or at least I am a partner to the boy, and we are going through the city swinging a la Peter and Miles style, webbing things up, kicking enemy butt, whatever. I don't know. All that to say, Spider-Man's cool. Theme parks are fun. What more do you want from me? Get out of here. I'm done with this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. We'll see you on the next one.